Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Charlene Israel. 100 million Americans are waking up to snow, ice, and freezing rain. This latest round of winter weather has claimed the lives of at least a dozen people across the South. It's also been crippling travel and left almost 500,000 homes without power. Wicked winter weather is bringing another day of complicated travel. Thursday begins with more than 4,000 flights canceled, leaving about 5 million passengers stranded nationwide.
I was anticipating going home on Thursday, had plans for Friday, but that's now going to be canceled.
The powerful system could dump more than a foot of snow on Boston, Philadelphia, and Washington. It's already shut down the federal government for today and closed schools up and down the East Coast.
I'm played out with the snow. This makes my job twice as hard.
This winter storm socked the South Wednesday and may be to blame for at least 12 deaths. 3 people were killed when an ambulance crashed on an icy road in West Texas and caught fire. A Dallas firefighter was also killed after being knocked from an interstate ramp and falling 50 feet. In Raleigh, North Carolina, people abandoned their cars on frozen roads, and many ran for cover after one trapped car caught fire.
Don't put your stupid hat on at this point in time. Protect yourself, protect your family, protect your neighbors. Let's protect each other.
Hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses have lost power in the Carolinas and Georgia, where ice and wind gusts snapped power lines and tree limbs. The roof of one North Carolina church collapsed. And in Georgia, this woman's daughter was nearly crushed when a pine tree fell on her home.
Hearing the tree crack and watching it fall from my window and landing on my daughter's room was very traumatic.
And this harsh winter has already depleted salt supplies in cities in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. It's also caused school systems to run out of snow days.
Want to take a look now closer at our nation's capital, which is being walloped by the storm. As you heard, even the government has been frozen in place. CBN's David Brody is out in the thick of the winter weather.
Well, when you think of Washington, D.C., you think of dysfunction, political dysfunction. Today, a much different type of dysfunction, weather, and lots of it. Over a foot of snow in many places in Washington, D.C., and this place is an absolute ghost town. The White House closed, Senate, House closed, federal offices all closed, and you've got runway problems all over at the 3 major airports, Reagan, Dulles, and BWI, Baltimore Washington International Airport. Many of the runways are closed, flights are delayed, there has been bus service suspended. So pretty much this city is shut down with no end in sight for the rest of the day, and this most likely will carry on into tomorrow, where those delays will mean some sort of delay for flights and trains and buses, even into Friday. David Brody, CBN News, in Washington, snowy Washington, D.C.
Kentucky has been ordered to recognize gay marriages from other states. Federal Judge John Hayburn ruled the state's voter-approved ban on same-sex marriage is unconstitutional. The ruling does not require the state to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. It does require Kentucky to recognize the marriages of gay and lesbian couples performed in areas where it's already legal. This is the latest in a string of rulings in favor of gay marriage following last year's Supreme Court decision that ordered the federal government to recognize same-sex marriages.
It's been 9 months since the Internal Revenue Service admitted it was targeting religious conservatives and Tea Party groups. Since then, the investigation into IRS wrongdoing has gone nowhere. The White House calls it a phony scandal, and President Obama says there's, quote, not a smidgen of corruption. But critics say the IRS is now trying to change the rules to keep conservatives out of the next elections. As John Waggy explained, some are calling for a special prosecutor.
This was President Obama when the IRS scandal first broke.
I will not tolerate this kind of behavior in any agency, but especially in the IRS, given the power that it has and the reach that it has in all of our lives.
But rather than find the source of the wrongdoing, critics say the IRS is trying to legally silence the very groups who were wronged by subjecting them to extreme scrutiny.
Now the IRS, in plain sight, is trying to make permanent all of the awful things they were doing to Tea Party groups, and now extend that to every 501c4 organization in America, and to make it permanent. It's really quite dreadful.
I think they're confusing a monarchy with a constitutional republic.
Jay Sekulow of the American Center for Law and Justice represents 41 conservative groups that were targeted. He testified about the IRS abuses on Capitol Hill last week, and he said on Wednesday's 700 Club that Congress may not be able to force the IRS to come clean.
It's probably time for a special counsel to look into this, because I just don't think the IRS is able to self-correct, and frankly, I don't think right now the FBI is really able to do a thorough investigation of what's happened here.
The Justice Department appointed Barbara Bosserman, a major Obama campaign donor, to investigate the IRS activities. Sekulow says that reeks of impropriety.
She had the obligation to say, you know what, I'm probably not the best one to do this. I'm a maximum donor to the Obama campaign.
While the lawsuits against the IRS go forward, Sekulow believes that some senators may be hindering or even contributing to pressure on the IRS to target conservatives.
I think the American people are going to have to really get to the ballot box come this coming midterm elections and make a stand. If the Senate goes in a different direction, things change drastically.
John Waggy, CBN News.
Your privacy is at stake in a new lawsuit over the NSA scandal. Some of America's most famous civil libertarians say they're suing the federal government in the name of every American who uses a phone. As Paul Strand reports, that could mean more than 300 million plaintiffs.
A U.S. Senator and top Tea Party leader went to this federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. to sue their own government for themselves.
And everyone in America that has a phone, we're filing suit against the President of the United States in defense of the Fourth Amendment.
It's aimed at stopping the kind of vast sweeping up of all Americans' phone records by agencies like the NSA without suspicion or warrant. Senator Paul says this lawsuit is to stop, quoting here, precisely the kind of overreach we fought a revolution over. And he expects the case to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
There's a huge and growing swell of protest in this country of people who are outraged that their records would be taken without suspicion, without a judge's warrant.
So who's been hurt by these vast phone record grabs and thus has standing to sue? If you don't use a phone, not you, says Virginia's former Attorney General, the lead counsel on this case.
But if you have used a phone in the last 5 years, this case is about protecting your rights as against your own government and their invasion of your privacy.
We have a class action lawsuit that could involve conceivably 300 to 400 million people.
Matt Kibbe heads up the Tea Party, suing along with Senator Paul.
This isn't Republican versus Democrat. This isn't about the Obama administration. This is about a government that's crossed the line.
They say if they win,
we will have pushed the federal government back across the line of trampling the Constitution yet again.
The White House shot back that the record grabs are legal.
We believe that the program as it exists is lawful. We're not alone. It has been found to be lawful by multiple courts.
Meanwhile, Senator Paul asserts this shouldn't hurt the war against terror one bit.
There's no evidence that there's been one terrorist caught or detained or prevented uniquely on this information.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
The Obama administration says about 1 million people signed up for Obamacare in January. That is the first time the new health law has met a target since that disastrous launch last October. So far, nearly 3.3 million people have signed up. That is more than 1 million short of the goal overall. Also, officials do not know how many of those sign-ups were previously uninsured or if they're among the millions of Americans who had lost their insurance because of Obamacare. And they don't know how many have sealed the deal by paying their premiums.
Government attorneys in Pennsylvania are appealing injunctions granted in favor of religious groups over Obamacare's contraceptive mandate. In 2 different cases, judges ruled the mandate violates the organization's faith. One ruling allows Geneva College to exclude birth control from its health plan coverage. A different judge determined that forcing Catholic entities to offer birth control could harm their organizations, causing decreased donations, loss of employees, and fines that could force the closure of some church programs.
A healthcare conscious bill is being endorsed by a large majority in Missouri's House of Representatives. The bill would allow healthcare workers and religiously affiliated hospitals to refuse to participate in procedures that violate their ethical or religious beliefs. The measure would apply to procedures such as those involving abortion-inducing drugs, artificial insemination, and embryonic stem cell research, among others. Critics argue the bill would block access to health care for patients, especially women. The bill is pending one more vote before moving to the state Senate.
Coming up, we'll unravel the mystery of the 4 blood moons, find out exactly what they are and what they mean for biblical prophecy after this.
The U.S. is denouncing the release of 65 Taliban prisoners in Afghanistan. Afghanistan President Hamid Karzai ordered the men be set free. The move comes as Karzai has taken an increasingly hostile tone toward the U.S. ahead of withdrawal of NATO combat troops later this year. U.S. forces in Afghanistan say some of the men are responsible for killing or wounding dozens of U.S. and Afghan soldiers. They're also accused of making bombs that have killed civilians. Officials say the men are likely to return to the battlefield to kill more coalition and Afghan forces.
Have you ever heard of a blood moon? The appearance of a single red moon is not unusual, but 4 of them appearing closely together is extremely rare, and that's what we're going to see this year and next year.
A new book says those mysterious signs in the sky are indicating that something big is happening in Israel. Eric Stakelbeck sat down to talk with author John Hagee about what this could mean for the Middle East and beyond.
The book of Genesis says God uses the sun, moon, and stars for signs and seasons. Examples can be found throughout the Bible. Think of how a star led the wise men to Jesus, or the sun stood still as Joshua led Israel to victory over its enemies. According to Pastor John Hagee, God is getting ready to speak this way once again.
There's a sense in the world that things are changing, and God is trying to communicate with us in a supernatural way. I believe that in these next 2 years, we're going to see something dramatic happen in the Middle East involving Israel that will change the course of history in the Middle East and impact the whole world.
In his latest book, 4 Blood Moons, Hagee lays out what he calls celestial signals. He describes how a series of blood moons in 2014 and 2015 will have great significance for Israel. Although single blood moons are a fairly regular occurrence, 4 of them appearing so closely together is extremely rare.
We've only seen a series of blood moons a handful of times over the past 500 years. So what exactly is a blood moon, and what is the biblical significance of it?
A blood moon is when the earth comes between the sun and the moon, and the sun is shining through the atmosphere of the earth and cast upon the moon a red shadow. And so the moon appears to be red.
Such moons appear in Scripture. In the book of Joel, God says there will be wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. In Acts, the Apostle Peter repeats that verse from Joel. And the book of Revelation says that during the Great Tribulation, the moon will become like blood. Blood moons are set to appear in April 2014 on Passover, and then again in September 2014 during the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. It's the same timing for 2015, for a total of 4 blood moons, all appearing on Jewish feast days.
The sun and the moon and the earth are controlled by God Almighty. He is the one that's getting them in a direct alignment on a certain day at a certain time, but each time it's a Passover or Sukkot.
In the past, the rare appearance of 4 blood moons on these feast days has coincided with major events for Israel and the Jewish people. 1492, Spain expelled the Jews. Columbus also discovered America, which became a safe haven for the Jewish people.
In each of these blood moons, you have something that begins with a tragedy and ends in triumph.
1948, Israel is reborn as a nation.
After 2,000 years, God supernaturally brought them from 66 nations, and a nation was born in a day. That again was a supernatural something that happened following the tragedy of the Holocaust.
1967, Israel wins the Six-Day War and recaptures Jerusalem.
For the first time in 2,000 years, Jerusalem and the state of Israel were together again.
The blood moons of 2014 and 2015 appear as Iran works towards nuclear weapons and Israel's neighbors, Egypt and Syria, are in chaos.
The end game is coming with this Iranian nuclear crisis.
The only reason Iran will not develop a nuclear bomb will be that Israel chooses a military solution to that crisis. I believe if that happens, that will start a series of events that will change the course of world history. If Israel does not, it will still change the course of world history.
Hagee warns of the Iranian nuclear threat through his work with Christians United for Israel, which he founded in 2006. It is now the largest pro-Israel organization in America, with some 1.3 million members. He also holds nights to honor Israel across the country and at San Antonio's Cornerstone Church, where he serves as senior pastor. The first event in 1981 drew bomb threats and vandalism from anti-Semites. Yet Hagee continues his mission.
If there was ever a time for the Christians of America to stiffen their spine and stand up and speak up, it's now. To see evil and not call it evil is evil.
He says it's still unclear what the coming blood moons will bring, but he is certain of one thing.
When all is said and done, Israel is going to prevail. The flag of Israel will be flying over the walls of the city of Jerusalem when Messiah comes, and it's going to be forever. And every nation that rises up in judgment against Israel, God will punish, and punish severely.
Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News, San Antonio, Texas.
Up next, have you ever wondered why some marriages succeed and others fail? We'll show you what happy couples have in common next.
Listen up, tomorrow is Valentine's Day, a time when many Americans pause to focus on love. So what is true love, and why do some relationships survive while others fail?
Well, these days, many couples choose to live together instead of getting married because they're not sure that they'll stay happy in the long run. But as Paul Strand reports, staying in love for a lifetime isn't as hard as you might think.
These days, marriage gets a bad rap. More and more attention is paid to divorce statistics, and you rarely see or hear about any couples living their dream for a lifetime. The cliche is that in American suburbs like these, people are leading lives of quiet desperation. But the fact is, many are not desperate at all, and they're living in really happy marriages that will last a lifetime. Now there's a book that shares the secrets of how they stay highly happy and married forever.
Before we got married,
Atlanta's Shanti Feldhahn and her husband Jeff have already written relationship bestsellers like For Women Only and For Men Only. Now this Harvard-trained researcher has gathered comprehensive data and research about really satisfied husbands and wives. What she found? Happy couples share a few key attitudes and actions. She puts all this in The Surprising Secrets of Highly Happy Marriages and teaches that anyone can learn them. The first of these happy habits, believe the best of your spouse, no matter what happens. Choosing to believe they care for you turns almost any situation positive. Jeff learned this from his own experience.
I knew that I could trust her. I knew that she had my best interest. I knew that she loved me, and I would believe the best.
The happiest couples go, okay, they couldn't have meant it, they love me, and let's move on. It makes a huge difference when you assume the best.
Shanti's research includes Kim and Sabrina Moore. They personify another of those traits that bring long-term joy. They went all in. There's no escape route or any thought of the D word, divorce. They don't keep secret cash accounts in case the relationship crumbles. And Kim describes the results of not going all in.
Death, because it creates a wedge, and God has designed it for it to be complete intimacy. And you can't have intimacy if you have hidden pockets, you know, things you're holding and hiding from each other.
Sabrina credits going all in for their 27-year union.
I believe that we are happier now than we've ever been.
And don't forget the little things. Thank your husband. Let him know you appreciate his efforts.
Saying it to a guy, that is his equivalent of I love you.
Men need to take their wife's hand, leave her thoughtful messages, and not be afraid of public displays of affection, like putting an arm around her.
All of those things convey that I'm choosing you all over again.
And men need to learn how to quickly get out of a bad mood.
So when he makes the effort to pull himself out of the funk and to not be grumpy, to not be morose, it's like, whew, this isn't going to go in this bad direction.
Another action of the highly happy, no unrealistic expectations. That's because if your spouse can't realistically meet your expectations, then you can't ever really be happy with them. Sabrina came into marriage with this problem.
There were expectations from her towards me that I had no idea that were there. So there was resentment that began to build up because she said, he should know this, and I didn't.
And there would be this wedge and this wall between us that he couldn't comprehend, and I couldn't comprehend that he couldn't comprehend. So
your expectations have to change coming into this thing.
Shanti says the research proves without a doubt the homes that practice the habits and attitudes highlighted in her book will be joy-filled. Struggling couples can use them to turn their marriages around. And the Feldhahns want people to know this truth, that the 50% divorce rate is a myth. About 80% thrive and survive, not a measly half.
If you know, most marriages do make it. Most marriages are happy. It's a completely different feeling, like, you know what, statistically, we're going to be just fine. We can get through this because most people do.
So the facts show the reality is you have no reason to be fatalistic. Every couple has it in their power to make their marriage one that could truly be called highly happy. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Atlanta, Georgia.
Finally today, Superbook continues reaching thousands of children and families around the world.
In China, 22,000 people attending church events met Superbook's character Gizmo and watched a video promoting the Chinese version of the website. Meanwhile, in Myanmar, 350,000 people viewed the kickoff episode of this series, and more than 100,000 people watched the first 5 episodes aired in Hungarian. In the African continent, 13 episodes of Superbook were broadcast on one of Uganda's leading TV stations. Very well done. Very well done.
The gospel animated.
Yes.
I love it.
Fabulous.
Still the same gospel. Praise God. Well, that's going to do it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
Take the time to tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you join us again right here next time. Make it a great Thursday, everybody.